Hebrews 4, 1 Corinthians chapter 4, and we pick it up at about verse 18. And he says, "But I will come to you shortly, if the master will, and will know, not the speech of them which are puffed up, but the power. For the kingdom of Elohim is not in word, but in power. What will ye? Shall I come unto you with a rod, or in love, or in the ruach of meekness?" So we just read that there to just establish that the rod is pointing to something that is used for correction. We know that how the book states that, hey, you beat your son with the rod, you spare his soul from death. So we're looking at, he's got a rod, and he said that he crossed over the river that caused a descent, or the going down. So let's look at Hebrews chapter 12. Because what we're going to ascertain from these two things, and the reason how this part it correlates to what we're discussing, is because we talked about on Wednesday when he's parted the Red Sea, and he made two bands, or two companies of people. There was a separation of the water. Moses lifted up his rod. That water separated Yasharal from Mizraim, or Israel from Egypt, or the righteous from the unrighteous. He said if one gets smote, then the other will live. This is what Jacob just stated. If one gets smited, then another one will live. And we'll sit back and we'll see an example of that when the master makes a statement on that in Matthew chapter 24. Ironically, I worked that in because somebody said something to me about that somebody tried to use that particular passage on him. But Hebrews 12 and 5. "And you have forgotten the exhortation which speak unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of Yahuwah, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him." Now, of course, the reason why we read that 1 Corinthians 4 is you see that Paul was stating that the rod would have been for rebuke and correction for those who had been puffed up with pride, who needed to be humbled. The chastening of Yahuwah is for the humbling of the individual. I reiterate very often that the book tells you that you're blessed when you're chastened, or the rod of correction is laid upon you out of his Torah. Hello. So 2 Timothy 3 and 16 tells us that all scripture is inspired by Elohim and is profitable for rebuke and correction, and for doctrine, that the man of Elohim may be made perfect. So the word itself can be literally viewed as a rod, something used for the correction, for the getting in line of an individual. We don't usually see, most of the time people take it as, Yah correcting you and some type of calamity or tribulation may befall you, which is accurate. But also that correction can come through from just the hearing of the word. That chastening may come through just from the hearing of the word. And when you allow that word, that rod, to get you in line, or will you resist it, is the question. Let's see the next thing he says. "For whom Yahuwah love, he chasten and scourge every son whom he received. If you endure chastening, Elohim deal with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasten not? But if you be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then ye are bastards and not sons. Furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh, which have corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of Ruachs and live? For they truly for a few days chastened us after their own pleasure, but he after our profit, that we might be partakers of his kadoshness. Now no chastening for the present seem to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless afterwards it yields the peaceable fruits of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. Wherefore lift up the hands which hang down, and the feeble knees, and make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed." Because usually when you're getting rebuked and chastened of Elohim, you're a little down, you're a little sad, you're moping, and this, that, there, and the third. And he told you to lift up those, to Let me correct myself. Lift up the hands which hangs down and the feeble knees, to stand up straight and to make a narrow path for yourself. Since we're looking at that narrow path, Matthew 7 and 12, and then we will go back to Genesis 32, because we do need John chapter 14 and Matthew 24, so you can just slide them on in somewhere, and y'all willing, we work our way back around now. But he said you need to make straight paths for your feet. You should already know, because I recite this particular passage in Proverbs to you quite regularly, that you need to make straight paths for your feet and not deviate to the left hand and to the right. This is in Proverbs chapter 4, but to stay straight ahead. See, that's the problem is we deviate to the left and the right, and we mixing kadoshness with profaneness, and you know what I'm saying? You can't do that. Can't mix carnal with spiritual. You can't mix the heavenly with the world. You can't mix the godly with the ungodly. These things don't go together. You know what I'm saying? Something's going to be overcome by the other. But nevertheless, Matthew 7 and 12.